Welcome to the Franciska Show podcast on JewishCoffeehouse.com, the show where I give a voice to Jewish issues, topics, and people. I'm Franciska, your host. Welcome back, Franstans. I'm so grateful for all the incredible feedback I've received from you over the last week from our latest episode. The throwback episode for this week is Primary and Secondary Infertility with Keshet Star. If you'd like a second throwback, we have another infertility episode that I will link in the show notes as well. Today's episode is about adoption, as you may have seen in the title. I do want to let you know that there was a technical issue that we discovered after the recording, so I had to use a backup recording for this. So this episode might not sound as clean, edited as you might be used to. You should also know that 2 adoptees reached out separately asking to share in this podcast, so this is episode 1 of 2. Our sponsor for today did not submit the information on time, so I will get her in next week. And if you're thinking, hey, how can I support Franciska? Guess what? You can be a sponsor on the show. You can dedicate a future episode to someone who has passed. Of course, if you'd like to contribute, but not in a monetary way, you can just spread the word and tell a friend about the show, and this is how you can support me as well. And instead of a promo today, I'd like to use this time to do a shout out to one of our listeners, Hillel Beerbreyer, who, after listening to the episode with Sahaba Wolf on the update that's needed in advice for frum women, Hillel reached out to say that he would like to offer an open invitation for anyone who is looking to upgrade their career and would like some help. So Hillel is someone who went from the Mir to Jewish education to an MBA and now a very corporate job. He's happy to help people out with intros, reviewing resumes, and whatever someone may need, he has an open door policy. So this is just some of the good that happens from this podcast, and I wanted to use a promo spot to do this shout out because we like helping people. We like finding solutions to some of the issues and complications that we have due to our lifestyles as Orthodox Jews. So thank you, Hillel, for your generous offer. So if you are interested in taking him up on this offer, please message me and I will connect you. And here we go. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Franciska Show, Franstans. Today on the show, we're here to talk about a personal story firsthand about being adopted as a from birth person. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you. Thank you for reaching out and offering to share your story. It's so important to share stories like these, and I'm excited to hear yours. So let's start however you feel the story begins for you.
So the story begins when I was 16. I was in a modern Orthodox high school in Brooklyn. It was towards the summer, so like taking finals. And I have one brother. He's married. My sister-in-law called me after school one day. And she said, we want to go visit grandma and, also who lived in Brooklyn. And I said, sure. She was bringing my nephew, cute little toddler. Yeah, why not? So we go to grandma. She was like 90 something. She was like just a beautiful old lady. And she makes a joke, a comment. She said, referring to me, I'm tall, dark, and handsome. So being a teenager and whatever, like to say weird stuff, I said, my parents, Ima and Abba, they're not tall. So why are you calling me tall, dark, and handsome? I'm not tall. I'm not like them. I must be adopted. So then basically that's when things started to come apart. My sister-in-law, she obviously knew.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So did your grandmother say anything back to you when you made that joke? When you say everything started to...
Not really. She didn't really know what to say, I guess. I mean, it's probably not her place, to fill me in on everything at that moment. She just, things just washed over from that generation. Just didn't really faze her what I was, the joke that I made and what the ramifications that would have. So she didn't really respond to it in any way. Not that I remember. But my sister-in-law definitely had a very visible reaction to what was going on. And then the story went on.
What's going on? You made a comment and somebody confirmed the comment for you?
My sister-in-law thought that when I made that comment, I knew, I had figured it out what was going on, and I knew that I didn't look like my parents, so like I'm not related to them. And apparently I'd been making comments like this for a while. So she started, like, she went into the bathroom, like she was crying. She was calling my brother, telling him that, like, I think he knows something, and he just said this very strange thing. My brother said he was going to come talk to me. He wasn't around, but obviously my sister-in-law wasn't going to break the news to me in my face. Like, my brother wanted to come to be the one to do it. We were very close at that point, and we're still very close. He's 12 years older than me, which also, we're a very big age difference. I was like joking with my sister-in-law, like we were leaving my grandmother, getting into the car, and I made a joke like, oh, was I like born a girl or something? Like, I don't know, I had like this thing, like,
Okay.
I don't know, I had this idea in my head. Meaning I always felt different, which was, a little strange. But she was like laughing, like I was trying to, make jokes to make her feel better and also like myself feel better, because I knew something was taking place. So there was a span of a few hours after that interchange at my grandmother to when I sat down with my brother and he actually told me what was happening or what had happened. Do you want me to go into that?
Sure,
Like
just
that,
give us in a few sentences.
or what had happened. So we basically came to my parents' house. My parents did not want to be there when I found out. It was too much for them. My brother was doing something that was like not really in line with what they wanted. They didn't want me to know at all. And I sat down with my brother and he's like, ask me anything you want about your past, about what you think. I knew obviously what was happening, so I asked him, am I adopted? And he said yes, which I didn't really expect. I don't think none of the parts of my conscious brain was actually expecting that to be a reality. I had a very, good relationship with my parents. I was a baby. They, gave me like pretty much whatever I wanted, and they loved me. My mother, like, she had a lot of love, almost like more than normal type of love that she had for me. And so I was not really expecting that. I knew that it was coming to that, but wasn't ever really a possibility in my head. It's a weird dichotomy because I always felt something was different growing up.
Did you give examples besides, or is it only looks?
What do you mean only looks?
Well,
like in terms of
you're dark or tall. The example you just brought up with your grandmother, that
right.
clearly stood out.
Right. So I guess that I ignored. Also, like, I don't know, I have dark hair. My adopted mother has dark hair, so I just I made it like I just made sense. Like, okay, I have dark hair, she has dark hair, and some things don't match, but one thing does match. So like I'll focus on that. But there was always that tension in the house and in the conversations when these things come up. Every family has these types of conversations, these types of jokes, and these types of, like, oh, like he must be adopted, or like, where did he get that from? Where did he get this from? Those comments were always taken like very seriously and quieted when those things used to come up around my family. And as me and my brother were coming closer together in age and maturity, then those jokes and things started to actually, make him uncomfortable and make him feel more guilty that I was saying something that I really didn't know what I was saying.
And the plan was never to tell you or to wait till you bring it up? Do they have a plan, your parents?
My mother said she was never going to tell me, ever. She wanted me to be her child. Like, no, she told me that. My father, he really was, subjugated to her will because obviously he being the husband, but he knew that it wasn't right. He never did anything about it, but he was always talking to rabbis, talking to people, trying to figure out, like, what should he do? What should he do? What should he do? I don't know what would have happened with that in the future, but my brother felt that, it was time, and he did it. Sounds weird. I'm thankful to him that he did it. I'm also, very angry that he did it. I was very angry back then, and,
why were you angry?
There was a little bit of a, I guess you would say, a fight when I found out. My parents had come back to the house after my brother had that conversation with me, and my father said something to my brother, and my brother got very upset, and basically he left. We still talk about it. Like, he dropped the bomb, and then like he just left, and like I was just like, there's no professional, but like not even, he couldn't even stay to like comfort me or talk to me. So that was a big point of anger that I had for a long time.
And remind me how old you were when you got that.
I was 16.
Okay. So you have this conversation, then your brother leaves.
That was very traumatic. And also it was just, this was like this was the secret. This was the fight. And, like my mother, like she could, like I remember like right after I had found out, like she couldn't look at me. Like that was very hard. Her bubble was burst. Her reality that she wanted to keep was not true anymore. We did heal from that, but it was never the same. My father, like we went on a walk that night, like he was trying to be somewhat of a comfort or somewhat of a listening to like what I was going through or whatever. He gave me like a whole story about like how I came into their life and how beautiful it was and, all the events leading up to it.
Can you give us some details?
Yes, they had second child infertility, and they went through everything that people in that situation have to go through. And they came to adoption, and it took them years to be able to adopt me. And he's telling me that I was apparently all the systems of adoption in New York had just switched to computer. So when they were matching children to families, it was like by a computer match. So he was told that that I was the computer match for them. Like my name came up with their name, and that's how they got the call, which is definitely amazing. Not exactly what I needed to hear at that moment, but
what did you need to hear at that moment?
The situation could have been handled more, I guess, gently. And, like with a psychologist, with a social worker, with a mentor, with something like that. Even a rabbi, like anything. But, it was just like kind of between us and the family dynamics, and things were just getting not nice when my parents spoke to my brother. And in terms of like what I needed to hear, I was definitely angry. It was trauma. It was just like, I just need time to like breathe. I need time to get my thoughts. This is like a life-changing event. Feel it's okay to feel like, things are up in the air and not stable. And, everything that you thought is really not true. But my father was able to tell me some things about my birth family, which is something I definitely needed to hear more of. I was very, very thirsty for information about what happened with them and, why I was given up and why I didn't live with them and all those types of questions.
Can you give us some more information on what you found out? First of all, were they Jewish?
So, yeah, they were Jewish. So that's why I didn't have to my parents, right. Yeah, my parents didn't think I needed to do Gerus L'Chumrah. So that's why I never got formally told about it as I was growing up. The reason on paper why they gave me up was simply because of emotional mental issues, which is something I was told probably the day or two later after, like when I found out. I knew it the whole time. But even when you're told that, you don't really know what it means. You understand a little baby and like, what does emotional issues really mean? Like they were having a bad day, like they couldn't, they didn't want to change diapers, like what? So that took me a very long time to come to understand what that meant and what the seriousness of that meant. But as an immature 16-year-old, it didn't really make sense to me. And that's why I think the search and the journey is so important for adoptees like myself, just to come to our own understanding of what it means that they gave you up and come to some sort of peaceful and real understanding of that. I carried those words through. That was my story, like I knew my birth parents couldn't take care of me because of mental illness. What that means, I have no idea. Now I know a little bit more about what that means from living and being around the block and seeing different people and talking to different people.
Could you share more about what that means for you? What do you understand more of now?
I mean, I'll just fast forward to
Sure.
3 years ago. I found out who they were, which was a whole nother story. We could talk about that in a second. But I found out my birth father passed away around 3-4 years ago. And I found out through like a relative of my birth father's through email 3 years ago. He died like 6 years ago. So I only found out 3 years ago. He died like 6 years ago. So I went nuts. I mean, I didn't go nuts, but I went nuts to find out information, to find out what happened, like what. And I got in touch with someone who's now my aunt, basically, and also a cousin of my father's, who I'm in contact with, and basically they found his body in the East River. They have no idea what happened, but obviously it couldn't. I understood that it probably had a lot to do with his mental illness. He had a very serious mental illness that, like, the term that I was told is paranoid schizophrenic. So apparently, like, not always in control of, you think people are chasing you or whatever. So when I understood that and saw, like, how he died, it started to seep into my head, like, how limited they were. I wouldn't say that brought me to peace with it, but it just helped me understand more.
You started looking into who your birth parents are at the time, and where did you ever get to meet your birth mother?
So when I first found out, one of the very good things my adopted parents did was they allowed me to write letters to my birth parents right when I found out, right when I was 16. So we had 6, 7, 8 letters over the course of 2 years, which was nice. Like, I was very cautious about what to say, and I wasn't just going to write them a letter and say, like, why'd you give me up? I wanted to, like, try to build up some sort of relationship and try to, like, coax some sort of information out of them, like simple stuff. What do you look like? What are you into? Like, I'm a musician. Do you play music? Where's our family from? Where in the world? Like, Holocaust, no Holocaust. So those were the first letters, just getting to know, like, my simple history, my grandfather's history and all that. In terms of my birth mother, he related to me, his family story. They were from the Holocaust. They were from Poland. They, like, 8 siblings. 7 survived. But about my birth mother, he didn't really share so much, which was interesting. But I never got to meet my birth mother. She's also very limited in terms of her mental illness, like very extreme mental illness. I would love to meet her. It just would have to be very careful type of situation. But it doesn't really look like I'm ever going to meet her. That's what my aunt has been telling me for a while.
When you say aunt, biological aunt or adoptive aunt?
My birth mother, she grew up with a sister in her family, but they were both adopted from separate families. So they grew up in the same family, but they were not related. So my mother was also an adoptee, which I found out also like 3 years ago from when I got in touch with this aunt who grew up with my mother.
As an adolescent, you have this big new reality change. The reality always existed, but now it has entered your conscious state of living, and it shatters a lot of your foundational beliefs, and it shatters all those beliefs, and you have to sort of rebuild it and start from scratch. What does your social life look like, your academic life, and then your religious life? How does that start affecting that?
My social life, I had a few very close friends in the school. We were in a band together. I had a second home with my best friend, and I went over there all the time. We had our group of friends, and it was fine. It was great. My friends really helped me through that time.
Did you share that with him when you found out?
Yeah. My close friends knew what happened.
And do you feel like they were able to understand and relate a little bit, or they just made some jokes and moved on? Was that helpful to share it with them?
I mean, in the beginning, it was just like jokes and, like move on. But, they were with me throughout the whole process of me finding out who my birth parents were and all the little details. So we did grow together as friends. We wrote songs about it.
Okay, then academically, did anything? Yeah.
Academically, I don't know how. I don't remember how I got through high school. Honestly, I still think about it sometimes. Not really sure how I got through.
So it was
sometimes
challenging.
I have dreams. Yeah, it was very challenging. But I had the principal, the manal of the school was extremely accepting, so that helped a lot. I mean, definitely that first day, I could not focus on anything. Like, I had the day I found out, I had a Regents prep class, which was just not really the best thing for me. I feel like I'm a lucky adoptee. I was able to find my birth parents, at least find out who they were. A lot of adoptees have no way of finding out anything about their past. And my parents nurtured my relationship with my birth parents. They wrote letters. I wrote letters through them, and then they were very encouraging, and certain things they wouldn't give me information about, but
like what?
Money. They didn't tell me who they were. So I was pretty much in the dark for 6-7 months about who they were until I was able to put the pieces together by myself.
Do you resent
which,
them for doing that, or do you understand where they were coming from?
I mean, I think at the time I was pretty resentful. This is my information. I want to know it. But I mean, I understood what they were doing. My birth parents they lived very close to where I grew up. And my father always told me that, like, we were afraid that you would just hop on a train and just go there. So that's why they felt that, one of the reasons why they felt that I shouldn't know. But when I found out, I didn't jump on a train to go find them. I was very cautious. I was very gradual with all my, it's a lot like the adoptee has to think about all these things. You have to think about the other person and how it's going to affect them. And even for myself, not to go so fast into the new territory.
Religious experience, was that affected at all?
I was already, I guess you'd say, on the downhill at that point in my life. Growing up FFB, doing things that not really understand anything, what you're doing. That was definitely part of it. This gave me an idea, like, well, is Hashem, like, out to get me or something? Like, what did I do to deserve this type of, like, insanity? That was one thought, which didn't help religious observance. But on the other hand, it did open up my mind for more possibilities. If Hashem could do something like this, like, it feels like this is going somewhere. It feels like the story is being taken somewhere. So that does seem at the same time, it seems chaos, but in a different way, it seems like a direction that I'm being brought in. So that made me stronger and made me more open to a relationship with God and the Torah and all that stuff. And I say in hindsight that the trauma of finding out was something that really allowed me to be susceptible to what would happen in Israel later in yeshiva. And,
what happened in Israel?
I firmed out. I firmed out. I got very serious and got more religious. I got into it, got excited about learning, got excited about doing mitzvahs and being that person.
Did you ever go to therapy?
Yeah. So, yeah. Also, when I found out I was adopted, my parents sent me to a therapist who kind of specialized in adoption, but not really, meaning she was really on the adopted parent side of the equation. She tried to help me. I don't have any recollection of pretty much a year of therapy that happened then. And then Israel, I finally found a therapist who fit for me, and yeah, I've been going to therapy ever since.
And now you're a married adult and a parent. Talk to me about how that experience has changed your perspective. Do you judge your parents, or do you wish your parents raised you with the reality that you're adopted? Are you able to understand your adoptive parents more now that you're a parent?
Meaning them not telling me.
Meaning, as a 16-year-old, you were limited in terms of your perspective, understanding, capacity for compassion, and all that. Now that you're an adult and a parent, do you see their side?
Not yet. I mean, I don't think I've ever had that thought.
So you still hold resentment for that decision?
A little, yeah.
Talk to me about your relationship now with your parents, and do you ever talk about it, or is it like the thing you don't talk about ever, but you go for Shabbos or for Yantif or whatever arrangement you have? Maybe you don't talk to your parents anymore.
No, I do talk to my parents. My adopted mother was actually passed away 2 years ago, but we had a more open relationship about everything. We were able to talk about what was going on for me and how I was doing, and my story with my birth parents and with my history, which was amazing. They were open to talking about it. But there was, me coming to Israel and me staying in Israel, that was something which was extremely hard for them, and that also caused a tremendous strain on the relationship, which we had to work on and we had to come to terms with. I think getting married made it much, much easier for them to accept that I was living in Israel, having this life away from them. The relationship, I think, was healed to a certain extent. My mother stood firm to what she said. She said, I would have never told you. She wanted to protect me. She wanted me to have a normal life. I mean, if you're asking, like, with my kids, like, of course I want to protect my kids.
So here's my question. How do you feel your life is not normal having this information? Because technically speaking, for anyone who's never experienced this or had anyone in their life experience this, nothing should change because you were raised in a beautiful family with two loving parents who wanted the best for you. So now that some new information came about, how does that change things now?
I mean, it depends what type of person you are. I mean, I feel like I'm the person who I wanted to know more about my birth family. I wanted to get involved with my birth family. Some people don't want to do that. Some people do not want to. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to, they don't want to question. They just want to go forward in life. I think it depends on who you are. I don't have so much contact with so many adoptees. I'm trying to have more experiences with them. You take it or you leave it. You can choose to leave it or you can choose to run with it.
My question is, how do you feel different? Yeah. You said have a normal life. So what do you feel about an adoptive child who knows that he's adopted or she's adopted? What makes them less normal? That's my question, I guess.
It's like a sense of stability. It's a sense of, I feel like we adoptees think that people who grow up with their biological parents, they just have this sense of stability. They just have this sense of things just make sense. Things are right. I'm where I belong. I think that people who grow up in biological homes, that's what they have. They don't have to question their origins. They don't have to question where they come from. Where's this from? Where's this trait from? Even the medical, like most adoptees don't know the medical history.
I'm sorry if I'm pushing too much, and if it's too triggering, you tell me, we'll move on. But I'm poking the curiosity bear here, if that's okay. Yeah. If you think of your life, if your birth parents would have kept you, what kind of life would you have had? Don't you think, oh, I'm so grateful that I ended up being raised by a family that is able to take care of me?
100%. That was, I think, the first meeting I had with my Rebbe, my Rosh Shiva. He told me that. That was the point he told me.
Was that comforting?
In a way, I mean, it was comforting, but it's like a bedrock premise. They saved your life. That's the story. Your parents saved your life, and they caused you to have an incredible life. It deepens the gratitude a lot. It's something that you have to come to terms with, and you have to try and let that knowledge influence the way you act towards them, which is something that's very hard with all these negative feelings of resentment and, wanting you to tell me and betray, and all those other feelings are still there, and the anger, but that they saved your life, and that's the reality.
Do you wish they had raised you, your adoptive parents, do you wish they raised you with the reality of you knowing?
No, I don't.
Why?
Because I had a normal childhood. I had 16 years, which I was completely normal, relatively. But I grew up happy. I didn't have all the feelings that I have post-16. I didn't have those feelings. I wasn't wondering about my birth parents and, like all the things that triggers and abandonment issues. I understood I was a normal kid and my parents loved me and I didn't have any doubts about it. And I grew up like every other kid in my class. They had their parents and I had my parents. Whether or not subconsciously I knew something else was going on that's a different question. But I don't wish that I knew. I think that finding out when I did caused me to be the person I am today, which I am happy with. And even after I found out, I had a few friends who were adopted, and I tried to go to them for advice. You guys have been living this your whole life, and you know it, and they had nothing to say.
Why? How
not
so?
Something
Because they grew up knowing.
And I think it was more also international type adoption, so that makes things harder. But me finding out when I did, it made it something that I had to deal with, and I still have to deal with. I was forced to step up to the issue and look it in the face and try to come to some terms with it.
So hypothetically, if you ever adopted a child, you would not want them knowing.
That's a different question. I wouldn't say that. That all the professionals say that you need to tell the child. All the professionals in the field, that's what they say. You need to tell them as soon as they are able to understand it, and then they live with it, and you don't have that trauma of finding out. But I would do it in a way that he would he or she would be able to explore it and to be able to try to, if they're into exploring it and if they're into coming to peace with it, and, that's something that they should be able to do. I might even force them to go and face it because I see how much it does for a person.
Talk to me about the relationship with your wife when you were dating. Do you feel like that's something you had to bring up? It was a big part of your identity. You had to bring up as soon as anything got a little serious. Like, how did your identity affect dating?
Yeah. So it was definitely like that. Like you said, when things got serious, like that needed to be told.
So did you have any previous serious relationships where you told the person you're dating and it didn't work out?
I don't think so.
Was that something you shared with Shatchanim in advance? Was there concern that you would be rejected for that information, or it was just very personal?
I wasn't really concerned about being rejected. I'm trying to think back. I don't even remember really it being such an issue. Maybe I was told not even to tell the Shalchanim. I really don't remember. I wasn't set up with the normal, like a Saradina cat's shot.
I see you're up to date on the Franciska show.
Yeah. I mean, my wife also went to her. So my shidduch was made through like just mutual friends. So they didn't really need to get into the nitty gritty about, all the background information. They just like,
friends
she's
vouching.
from Brooklyn. Yeah, she's from Brooklyn. He's from Brooklyn. Like, sounds good.
So at what point did you bring it up? And what was that like?
So the fourth date, for me, it just bringing it up really just solidified, everything I was feeling towards my wife.
What does that mean?
Like that, like I feel comfortable telling it to her, and I felt good to discuss it with her. And I think it propelled the relationship forward. She didn't get scared. She's also an out of the box type of person. So it wasn't like, oh my God. It was just more like she had a curiosity of what it was like for me. So that was we have a very positive experience with it, which I'm very grateful for.
You did mention you're a listener of the show, so you might have heard episodes on infertility, episodes on abortion.
Yeah.
Or the one episode we did so far. Are you triggered by that kind of conversation? What does that bring up for you? How do you experience this information, these conversations, versus people who are listening out of pure entertainment or curiosity?
I'll start with the abortion thing. It's bigger in my mind. I mean, I don't feel threatened by it. It just, it makes it just all the more interesting. Each abortion could be an adoption. Like you could think in those terms. I'm still trying to see how they all fit together.
So what do you mean by that?
But I mean, adoption has gone down tremendously over the past 50 years because of abortion.
Do you think that's good or bad?
I mean, that's already getting into the question. Do you think adoption is good?
No, I'm saying, do you feel bad for other people when you find out they're adopted? Or are you happy for them that they were rescued from being killed?
Wow. I mean, it definitely dodged a bullet, I feel like.
Because that's not a given that you feel like you dodged a bullet. I'm just putting it out there.
What do you like for other people?
Because some people might feel like, I would have rather not have this life. I don't know.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, also I'm coming from more of a religious type of perspective on it. Even though the halacha is, there's lines and there's degradations and there's rules and when not to and when yes. So that's why I think my general outlook is you dodged the bullet. Like it's good to be alive. Like even though it could be very hard. So I guess that's
going back to that question before where I brought up the episodes on abortion and infertility. Can you comment on the infertility piece? Do you feel like people who suffer from infertility shouldn't pursue adoption?
No. They should adopt. For sure they should adopt. I just think it's very hard coming from you're trying to have your own child and you're trying and it doesn't work, and now you have to settle for adoption, which is kind of like the second best. So that needs to be dealt with, that pain and that disappointment. Like you have to come to peace, you have to heal from that if you want to be able to give your child, everything you have to offer. So yeah, I think they should adopt. Understand that you're not getting a biological child, and it's not going to be exactly the way you think, and it's complex. It gets complex, and you have to be willing and ready to look that in the face and be able to face it, with your child or with your spouse together.
If I tell you now that my next interview today actually is also with an adoptee, a woman,
Well,
and it just happened that you're scheduled on the same day, so this will be a series. Is there anything
cool.
you'd want to express to her or to the audience? Any information you'd like to spread by speaking today?
Yeah. In the adoption world at large right now, like for adoptees are getting older, they're coming into their own. Adoption is getting a lot of not such good press, I would say.
Why?
Because the decisions are being made against the best interest of the child. Meaning to say, what do I mean? Meaning closed adoption, for example, like taking away people's identities and changing their identities. That's something that is being very heavily challenged right now. And also the idea that adoption is just like a rosy fairy tale ending. I mean, that's the general idea of adoption, like a baby gets a home. But the research and all the adoptees are coming out now, and they're saying adoption is not perfect. And adoption means a child has gotten separated from their mother. And a big school of thought that it's a trauma, like that is a trauma. One of the famous books about this is called The Primal Wound by Nancy Ver, I think. So what I want to say about that is that it's okay. It's okay to feel trauma. It's okay, not to feel stable and not to feel okay with adoption, even though you had a perfect life. And there's tons of support groups out there for adoptees in general, who they're talking about these things and, how they deal with the trauma and how they deal with, not knowing their background and how they need to be the son that to the adopted parents, and they need to fulfill that role of taking care of their parents' pain. But that's okay. It's okay to feel pain in this thing that is adoption. And it's something that we have to heal from. My point is not to look at the world and see everyone's yelling. Like, people are yelling, they don't want adoption anymore. They want adoption to be erased because it's like kidnapping. It's like, just taking a kid away from his parents, and it's not for the child's best interest, and it's only being made for the birth parents' interest and for the adopted people's interest. I don't think that way. I think adoption is very good, and I'm extremely grateful that I was adopted. But at the same time, there has to be a acknowledgement of the trauma and all the things that we're missing. We are missing a lifetime with our biological parents, something that's not going to change. The same way my adopted parents saved my life. On the other hand, my birth parents, I never met them. And that's something, I'm going to have to live with. I met my birth father first time. I met his gravestone. That was my meeting him. It's very hard. And there needs to be a way to process that and a way to discuss that with people, and to have people understand you, with a spouse, with a mentor, with a therapist, with whatever it is. But it's okay to feel the negativity, and there is a way to get past it, I believe. So that's my message.
Do you feel like the abandonment piece and the trauma comes out? Do you see it as an adult?
Every day.
So give me an example.
Anxiety. That's something I struggle with. I have a lot of different understandings about my anxiety, but I think the abandonment and the trauma is definitely in there. I don't know how it all fits together, but like having a family, I'm very worried about my kid, my boys, for no reason at all. That's something, like maybe something's happening to him at school. Maybe he's sick. Maybe he's this. Maybe he's that. Maybe a piano's going to fall on his head. Like, these are all just like, my brain is trained that things are not okay. And that's something that's very deep inside me. And I believe it comes from that trauma that they say, being separated from your birth mother, losing your stability. What happens to the baby when that happens? If you read The Primal Wound, then all that stuff is in there. So, yeah, I believe that the trauma is there.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. and for reaching
Thank
out.
you. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening until the end. If you would like to connect with our guest and or join his support group, his WhatsApp group, please check out the email in the show notes. You can also message me directly and I will put you both in touch. Next week, join us for part 2. I want to invite you to join the WhatsApp discussion group. Message me. I will give you the link to join. I'd like to throw in a shout out to Rabbi Johnny Salman, one of our sponsors. In case you have been thinking of reaching out to him, I want to give you some ideas of questions that you may have that people go to him for. So how does one halakhically and spiritually negotiate a marriage where one spouse is observant and the other one is not? How should one spiritually respond to a personal or professional crisis? What halakhic compromises are justified for the sake of shalom bayis? These are some of the topics or questions that you may want to reach out to Rabbi Johnny Salman with. His information will be linked in the show notes. If you are still listening, thank you. So I have an idea I'd like to throw by you, and maybe you can help with some suggestions of who would be a good fit for this kind of episode. I'm looking for 2 exes, essentially 2 individuals who got divorced, who'd be willing to come on and talk about the process of the get and that dynamic. And let's see if we can get any volunteers for this kind of episode. If you like this podcast, you might enjoy Orthodox Conundrum and Chochmat Nashim, Intimate Judaism, and Let My People Eat. All podcasts on the Jewish Coffee House Network. Go check them out. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. And see you next week.